there is a space called the Kalyan space. The scientific world knows about the existence of this unmanifested thing. It is referred to as dark matter, dark energy. It's simply the primordial space. Chaos? There is neither Brahma, nor Shiva, nor me, nor you, nothing at all. At some point, do you just fall into it? It feels everything just kind of bubbles up and turns inside out. And this tiny, tiny dot with a coal-like ear, suddenly an enormous layer of the universe unfolds for you, and your brain just can't process it at all.
There is consciousness, yes, and then there is the soul. So, what is its purpose? Our body, and what happens to the soul after death?
Well, to answer this question, we need to sketch out a bit how all of this originally happened. There are more traditional descriptions of how the world came into being, but I will step away from those traditional accounts a bit. Instead, I will share how practitioners perceive it. That's all. I will be talking as if it happens over time, but that's shock. So what is this? There is a space called the Kalyan space, Adi Kalyan. Sometimes it is called Adi Shakti. It's nothing. Unmanifested, imperceptible, yet existing and having some kind of impact on manifestation. When it will appear. In our modern world, the scientific community knows about the existence of this something. It is referred to as dark matter, dark energy. In general, it's something like that. It has an impact, but how it exerts that impact and how to measure it, instruments can't see. A person can't see it either. No one sees this because the manifested cannot perceive the unmanifested. And this space, it is described in texts as space, chaos, a space where there are no forms, a space where there is nothing to perceive. There are no images, no pictures, no colors, no geometry. So it's chaos, imperceptible, every way.
Nothing.
Something, if you, Kalyan, say that you are nothing, well, kind of softened.
So, okay, is this space part of the universe or beyond the universe? Where is the Brahman?
It's everywhere.
Or beyond the Brahman? Are all the universes in this space?
This is where we start from a moment when there is absolutely nothing. This is just the original space of chaos. There is neither Brahman, nor Shiva, nor me, nor you, nothing at all. Just absolute. Imperceptibility, but at the same time, fullness. There are diaries of Nikola Tesla, and in his diaries he wrote that I suspect. And my experiments show that ether is the densest substance that can exist. This doesn't correlate with that, but technically we are more rarefied than the original space. That's exactly why we can somehow create the illusion that we are moving. It kind of threw me off a bit, not in the right direction, but that's not the point. In general, there is this space and it is absolutely nothing, yet it is filled.
Absolutely nothing.
At the same time, it is filled with nothing in terms of imperceptibility. There are no organs of sense there suddenly for some reasons. Something emerges from this space that has wave effects, that is something that glows. Let there be. Something that has form. In the scriptures it begins, some scriptures say, in the beginning there was God. In the beginning was the Word. Yes, and the Word was with God. So what is the Word? It's a wave, it's already the propagation of something in a medium. In other scriptures, this is the pillar of fire. This is kind of pure consciousness that is infinite. So, what is meant by the term infinite? What exists, something manifested, can already be perceived, but it's unclear what its form is, which is why it's infinite. In reality, it does have a form, of course, but it doesn't have one. Its form is manifestation. This is the form, this geometric figure called manifestation. But in the books, it is described as just an infinite pillar. To some extent, this corresponds to reality. So this infinite pillar, upon appearing, asked the question, I'm really exaggerating here. It asked, who am I? What am I anyway? Not. Receiving any reasonable answer, it decided to perceive itself from the outside. To do this, it originally divided into two components. These two components are known to us as Shiva and Shakti. There are no gender distinctions there at all. At the same time, there exists its original state. Atman, the original Brahman, is sometimes referred to as Shiva. There are different terms, 108 names of the original. So there is its original unmanifested state, formless, infinite, yet perceivable. And now there are two of them. Two divisions. First iteration, the Shiva step, it all came from the same source. It divided. What happens next? It's like, whoa, it divided and then it connected. And it connects, experiencing an infinity of sensations. Orgasm, essentially ecstasy and explosion. And this explosion divides it into multiplicity. This original one exists in its primordial meaning. It exists in the divided, and it already exists in contact with each other, with itself. And it all spills out into a huge number of rivers, streams, waves, processes, sounds, frequencies, light, shapes, geometry. In short, that's it. In this state, it is already called cherry. There is already a name, it already exists. It's all the same original. In this Vishnu, fractal processes begin to occur, so self-similarity of self-copying. Each little fractal of all this is like a little tomato, like a berry on a bush or a tree. And each of these little tomatoes is already a world, a Brahma. Brahma already has a narrowed spectrum of perception. That's why Brahma doesn't recognize Shiva. He can no longer see the original. He believes he is strong and always in dispute, creating reality by dreaming it into being. Like us, he creates dreams from nothing. In fact, he dreams it into being. That's how we create our dream. Out of nothing, we just create it. There are trees, other people, cars, and situations, and all of that. And then you open your eyes and where is it all? Once? The whole world. You can't find it anymore, you can't touch it for sure. Brahma also creates our world. And this energy originally and the state of pure consciousness goes on, going. Through multiple iterations, an infinite number of these taras reaches the state of matter, from which all this is woven, gathered, and constructed. Thus, as Brahma wished, inside our cosmic egg, these eggs, universes, however many you can imagine, that's how many there are, and in each one sits its own creator, its own God, its own Brahman, who dreams and creates. This world was ruled for as long as there are those who rule it. He will only reduce the Aussie rules. But how else will he do this? What mechanism? So he closed his eyes and imagines all of this as a story, or is it something else? His eyes are initially closed. He can't perceive the original state. His attention is immediately focused on creation, on manipulation. With these endless tattvas, even though there are only 5 of them, they have divisions, splitting, dividing, and he manipulates them. That's why I use the word dreams, so that there's at least some understanding of how this is created. These endless tattvas, although there are only 5 of them, but they have a division to divide, to separate, he manipulates them. That's why I use the word dreams, so that there's at least some understanding of how this is created. Here's a person who can realize in a dream that they are dreaming, gaining some incredible ability to create, to manifest whatever they want. What they create in that state feels just as real as here, sometimes even more intense, but it quickly ends, and they wake up. That's how you were at 5. This is the world where I can't do anything, but inside his dream he is all-powerful. Here is Brahma, all-powerful inside his egg. You pull him by the egg, and that's where his powers end. But he doesn't even try to pull away. He enjoys being in a state of omnipotence. We are characters in his dream, but he doesn't even try to pull away. He enjoys being in a state of omnipotence. We are characters in his dream. Again, just like in our dreams, there are characters, but as soon as we open our eyes, where do they go? That's it, they no longer exist. Brahma dreams the world. In this world, there are an infinite number of scenarios. These scenarios are constantly being added to and continuously evolving. There were several waves of creation of beings. Some beings are known to us, like angels, demons, archangels, and all the rest. And at some point he created a human, a unique being, containing within itself a likeness of the original. But everything is asleep. It's the same as this. That's not entirely true, of course, but at least it's something to help understand. Here is a sperm cell, and potentially this is a human. But for now he's just this little worm.
This is kind of activator.
Yes, but I mean, it's all already embedded in him, basically. So those are some genes, those are some settings that are present in him. The same is true for us. All the settings are present to grow into the original state. With the help of something, everything is already built into us, which is interesting.
This, according to Shiva's assignment, was Brahma. He didn't see it. He imagined what Shiva was like based on the texts that describe why this happened.
When Brahma created his world, it was multi-frequency, and it's like the archangels who tune the strings of a string instrument. There's no way for them to touch each other, and you can only pluck them, and only in sound do they somehow unite. And these strings are also deities, not just unconsciously. They are also personalities, and at some point they, rather, hear the Creator in us while we want to touch each other. There's no way to touch each other, and you can only pluck them, and only in sound do they somehow unite. And these strings are also deities, not just unconsciously. They are also personalities, and at some point, rather, hear the Creator in us while we want to touch each other. Well, come up with something like twist a thread so that we can touch each other. I had a choice to either break the whole world and rearrange it differently than apparently it was done, or to create a being that weaves through all these strings, meaning, roughly speaking, we have a woven material, but it's only woven from parallel threads, and we, like a net, just wove it with a perpendicular thread. Or to create a being that weaves through all these strings, meaning, roughly speaking, we have a woven material, but it's only woven from parallel threads, and we, like a net, just wove it with a perpendicular thread. And this perpendicular thread is what became a human. His structure is flow-based. But in order for there to be a game, for there to be a cartoon, Brahma didn't reveal this structure right away, right off the bat. Like, here you go, he's not really into it himself. So, let's say he's ready to comprehend this structure, because his attention is completely focused on the architecture of the world. He doesn't want to look at the causality of it all, where he needs this. He, like an enthusiastic child, plays without thinking about who gave birth to him. A child in general, when they start to think about how they came to be after some time has passed. And here he is too, our Brahma, playing. He doesn't give a damn. Where did he come from? He is considered, according to the books, unborn, meaning created. This being appeared. And when? The primordial teachers gave this being the opportunity to manifest itself as fiery streams. This is, by the way, the third course. Why am I telling you all this? So, a technique merged, a technology for connecting these unrelated frequencies. That is some kind of action. When you take all these strings and just twist them into a single bundle, squeeze them. Here we have exaggerated this very strongly, yes. This person is pressing, exaggerated very strongly. We don't compress, we express through a person. These strings, yes. They start to interact with each other through us. Initially, the energy centers are not connected to each other. They can't touch, even if we ignite our own. Let's say there is the third center, its fiery essence spreads into the area of the fourth center. They pass through each other like two radio waves of different frequencies. Why do we need a station to get to hell? In the ether, they don't touch. They pass right through each other. But a person has the ability to raise the intensity of manifestation so much that they start to notice each other, and that's when it happens. The synthesis of connection, an infinitely powerful process when a certain number of people have realized it. Speaking of which, I said, thank you all, we're quite done, and these practices started to fade away. They became less in demand in terms of reality. But the bearers of this knowledge say, guys, there is still this form, but you clearly don't need it anymore. But here it is, it exists. So, as of today, there is no demand in reality for such people. But that very configuration and access he has not retained. And those people who somehow realize this gain infinite superiority over those who haven't. And because they don't know about the journey, because they want to. And the difference is why they didn't become, and that's it. But there is no longer a demand in reality for such people. They already have these fiery pillars standing. And it's really cool. I practiced again with one of the practitioners, like at the very beginning of my career when we went through this together. This practice of the fiery pillar is individual. We were sitting together. I'm just saying, let's do this together. Let's look inside the energy center. And we practice. When you're inside the body and observing the energy from within, you see how something spreads out. First inside, then it goes beyond the physical. It becomes diffuse. So, we're looking at the tail of the snake. But there is a way to direct your attention, not to the spreading of this, but to the very source from which it all flows. And so, when you direct your attention there, you keep directing it. And at some moment, you get too distracted, and then you kind of fall into it. It feels like reality has turned inside out. And this little thing, from a coal to an ear, A little point suddenly unfolded into a vast expanse of the universe. This is the brain. It doesn't process this at all, meaning the brain says, that's it. All right, goodbye, I'll come back. And you finish your meditation. But this one, it unfolds into a vast expanse of the universe. It's enormous. And as you perceive it, you feel like you're turning inside out. I don't know how to explain this. You already see yourself as a thread, and around you is an incredible space. And this space, in some of its areas, is permeated with these fiery cords. And some are just like a wire, or like an LED bulb that isn't connected. Do you understand that it exists, but it's not functioning? Yeah. And there are those that just blast fire. And you look at that, you look at yourself, and you're like, wow, check this out. I am the same. And immediately there's understanding. And that's why I can perceive it, because I am the same. Because until this thing turns on, the little LEDs won't work. And until you release them, you can't perceive reality in that turned inside-out state. You stay inside this little thread, and it seems to you that this thread is everything that exists. But in reality, no way. Everything that exists is right behind this little point in the center.
And will it appear in work or in one place somewhere?
This point is in each of them, but the only difference is the density of the space you enter. And this density is also identified in relation to the densities you're familiar with. So our density is manifested at the fourth center, and that's how everything every day feels. It's the fourth center. In theory, it should be made zero. Reference point. So when you've lived here for 40 years and you dive into your consciousness from the 100th center, you feel like you've ended up, I don't know. In absolute space, it's rarefied, everything is delicate, you feel amazing, you can turn around and just look. The increase in density downward and intensification upward makes it seem light. If you appear below, it feels like you're inside a steel bar, dense. And this increase in density and heaviness downward, and even more intensification upward, makes it seem like it's very light there. The same thing happens if you appear below. It feels like you've turned inside, I don't know, a steel bar, just how dense and immobile everything is, so clumsy and rigid. But at the same time, you understand that it still moves in its very slow rhythms, and it seems impossible to be there at all. Well, screw it, I won't go down there, because I'm used to this level, you come out at this level. How about at home? Everything is clear. Everything is also density. Dad, mom, it's familiar to you. But when you travel, you let go relatively, and you find out that at other levels of energy, there are bodies. For some, that center is the fourth one. For you, it's the 108th. But for another body, that's their center. I let go relatively, and it turns out that at other levels of energy, there are bodies. For some, that center is the fourth one. For you, it's the 108th. But for another body, that's their center. There's their body. For some, that center is the fourth one. For you, it's the 108th, and for another body, that's their center. Inside, there's their body. For my living, for your body's flow, in our flow, there are many bodies. Just imagine, inside there's a body. For my living, for your body's flow, in our flow, there are many bodies. Just imagine, there's a spring from which a river formed, like the Mississippi River. Imagine it coming from a single spring, and so one stands on one coast, the other on the other coast. And it seems like nothing connects you at all. But if you start moving along these little streams, moving with the current, going up, up, up. We had a conversation and I said, no, we always go against the current if we're heading towards the original. It's the same here. You've entered a certain channel and you start moving only with the current. And eventually, you'll reach the source from which it all flows. And here it's the same. We be. Inside your flow, being so unaware of the wholeness of unity, you might get the feeling that there's someone else there. But if you follow these little streams, sooner or later you'll stumble upon someone else. And it's like, whoa, it turns out that's me too. And there are a huge number of these levels. But there is the practice, the setup is not about climbing through levels, but rather jumping into a teleport. It's the same as in Moscow. You can drive a car, especially during rush hour, and curse everything in the world. Because it's just unreal, absolutely. Although it's a bit easier now. And there's the metro where you get on, go down, and pop up where you need to be. Navigate centers, like a traffic jam. At Bindu, dive and resurface originally. That is, we climb through the centers. It's like getting through a traffic jam in Moscow. And then there's Bindu, where you dive in and resurface in a state of the original, straight to it. But in order to dive in there, the person, that part of consciousness that is here perceiving everything through the senses, needs to have a skill. A skill, not knowledge, not agreement, but a skill to stop perceiving everything that surrounds us Must a skill. A skill, or not knowledge, not agreement, but a skill to stop your perception of everything that surrounds us. It's incredibly hard to explain and even harder to understand. Physical, to completely stop perception. This is the only somewhat reasonable example I give to people about completely stopping it. Right now, virtual reality goggles have appeared. And when you're sitting in those goggles, you can't figure out how to get out of them. Well, how do you pull yourself out of them? You take your hand, take them off, and you tell me there are no hands, but I'm using these hands to move. They don't grab anything, no matter how I tell you to use the other hands, which are somehow detached from the body. It's like this body of mine, it's square, some kind of nonsense. Or it's just this sword that cuts. And I don't know about those flying bananas coming at me, but I'm exaggerating, but that's the essence of it. Or it's just this sword that cuts, and I don't know about those flying bananas coming at me, but I'm exaggerating, but that's the essence of it. As long as you're trying to do something in this virtual space, you'll never get out of it. This is the process. Yes, well, that's it. We're sitting right now in virtual reality goggles, completely forgetting that there is something that looks through these goggles. But there are practices. These are practices for serious level of departure. Practices of diving into the Bindu. Practices of conscious dying. This is from the tradition of Bon Buddhism, for example, conscious dying when they jump into the Bardo space through the crown of the head, piercing it. The same skull sometimes splits among practitioners, especially fanatical. A real process. I went through them too. It's a very peculiar feeling when the bones of your skull start to move. And it's precisely at this moment, what I'm trying to explain right now, at this very moment, you just take it. And so you just pull these virtual reality goggles a bit like this. I'm like, where am I? But if there's something interesting there in this world of China, well, who cares? And again, you carefully put them on yourself if nothing here interests you anymore. Like this, you pulled them away, it feels good, but I can even go further. It will be after death. No, wait. So you carefully put them on again if nothing here interests you anymore. That's how Kaif pulled them away. But I can even pump them up further. It will also happen after death. No, wait. So when you have a physical living body, you're embedded in this system. This system nourishes you. You're connected to everything. Or rather, through your physicality, we are connected to the flow. And when you start to show off, you get into places where physics doesn't belong. This system nourishes you. You're connected to everything. Or that through our physicality, we are connected to the flow. And when you start to show off, you get into places where physics doesn't belong. But we can disconnect from physics as a part of consciousness. Step away from it. But it's like how I can pull my shirt until I let it go. But we can disconnect from physics as a part of consciousness, step away from it. But this is how I can pull the shirt until it lets go by one. Again, we can pull part of our energy away from ourselves. We can dive into the Bardo space, but we go in there with elastic suspenders because our physical body is still quite functional. And you get in there, I'd say great, wonderful fun, but then something feels off and you're back in your body. It's like a berry. It won't let you move anywhere. But what is death? Death is when this embeddedness in a harmonious, balanced, and filled world of flows is cut off. It gets cut off. As long as you have it, we also have a physical body, an energy body, and a part of consciousness. As long as a part of consciousness is in the physical realm, it can go anywhere. There's an anchor here. It always pulls you back. With the magnet, when there's no physics, we lose connection. Here with these flows, we no longer have Bindu, we don't have it anymore. So we no longer have those divine qualities. There's no energy, no will, we just have these 5 things missing. It's all just constructs, the soul. Where is the soul? It's all this construct, meaning the soul is a combination of everything. It turns out that their creation is everything. And what cuts all of this off perceives what it perceives.
But this is consciousness. Consciousness is the soul.
You could say that, but if we make such an equivalence now, then my explanation will have to be re-explained. Yes, that's why I talk about the soul. It has many layers, and one of the final layers that completes it is pure consciousness.
And what about the subconscious?
Well, you can just say it's the subconscious. But then we will stumble upon psychology, because in psychology there is consciousness and the subconscious. So the term is already taken. The subconscious, yes. These are more philosophical conversations. In general, the soul is consciousness. It perceives the surrounding reality at all available levels. And the closer the level is to matter, the harder it is to perceive what stands behind it. So we can't look back. We are always turned towards materialization.
And indeed, the soul sees because it is multidimensional.
At different levels. At different levels of perception, they are different. In my early practices, I reached a level that for me is already in the past. So when I first reached that level, you sit in your body. Here you have perception, having done the exercise along with the ascetic practices, meaning you really pushed yourself hard. So let's say I could no longer stay within the physical realm, meaning my consciousness would calmly slip out. My physical state was very weakened, so I slipped out to a certain extent. I then called it a hub. From this hub, I could see what was happening. It's probably hard to pin down an exact number, but it feels like there were about 20 bodies simultaneously doing their own things, just your bodies. As long as I'm not saying it's not my 20 bodies, there were probably more than that, but let's say it's 20. They went about their business, felt, thought, reflected, perceived, and these informational streams from 20 different bodies were passing through my perception. At that moment, I didn't understand what I was, and it overloaded my usual way of perceiving so much. I was completely unable to think about it or analyze it. It just flowed through me. What I was at that moment, I didn't understand what I was at that moment, and it overloaded my usual way of perceiving so much. I was so unable to think about it or analyze it. It just flowed through me. So, at the same time, I felt 20 bodies and everything they were doing, and I couldn't even intervene in it. I was so unable to think about it or analyze it. It just flowed through me. That is, you simultaneously feel 20 bodies, everything they do, and you can't even interfere with it. It's not like you. Just walk towards it, eat it, and at some point, and so on, where I am, this is the flow. This is it. I don't know how to explain it. It's like a server connected to many cameras, video cameras, that are simultaneously supplying this information. And I will connect this server to something else. So I managed to somehow to realize, not even to see, but just to feel as if some kind of unified whole trying to escape from this perception, from the overload, from hiding it. I'm wondering, where am I? Where is my body? Where is that simplest thing? I perceived it, but the memory didn't remain. My second attention feels absent here, but it exists there. I don't know how. And this something is my body of the second attention, but being here, it feels like I don't have it, but it exists. And being there, I don't know how to be there, because I don't have that skill yet. But at these levels, there is this consciousness, for which it's just a given, of course, to be there. If we go even higher, there's also consciousness, a personality that perceives thousands of bodies. Here is our soul, this is it. This is the chain of perceptions. Perceive from one and many bodies. Perception here, iterations elsewhere. It's here I perceive, but there the iterations happen. Here I don't perceive from multiple bodies, but rather from timelines. So there can be various scenarios, and within those scenarios, there can be several physical bodies. It's also something that the brain finds difficult to feel and accept. Well, yes, in this scenario, you understand, you find yourself at different points in that scenario. That is, all sorts of scenarios. In these scenarios, there may be several physical bodies. This is also difficult to feel with the brain to accept. Yeah, so in this scenario, you understand you're at different points in that scenario.
So, ideally, this something maybe kind of manages, well, let's say, from my perspective, it seems to me that this soul probably manages many bodies at once, meaning it has divided itself. It perceives. I couldn't say that it manages. It sees. It exists somewhere in these 20 bodies. It turns out it is all whole.
20 bodies, strong soul.
Well, you could say that. So, if such an effect has occurred, it means you have such a large, well, for example, such a powerful, formative soul, or something that can manage 20 bodies at once. Yes, that's how I understood it. Yes, that's just a level. This is a level, this is power. Well, the fact that it can manage 20 bodies at once, well, no, that's just for us and your personal level.
This is my personal level, the ability to reach there with my perception, if I can get there with my perception. Right now, I can't see the 20-year timelines and I can't perceive them at this moment. I need to take on some asceticism again. Detach myself from everything worldly and dedicate some time to practices. And again, reaching there doesn't mean that it's me or not me. I can reach there. So that's part of my body. But I went deeper. And I climbed not through the flow like I initially did. I climbed through the bindu. I reached a level where there is no difference at all. The body, whether it's yours or not, whether there are many of them or few, you just see how these scenarios come from the Brahman or from the source. It doesn't really matter what they're called, how they manifest in space. And you can, from this state, you can actually concentrate your attention at any point of any scenario. There is no human aspect, no humanity, no humankind at all there. It's just a scenario. In each scenario, it's a whole universe, from creation to destruction. And there are an infinite number of these scenarios.
The scenario. Multivariability. This existence, right, Goose?
Mrs. Persian, yes. And not just that, but she certainly and undeniably indeed has a remarkably high level of the personal.
So, yeah, you get there, you don't see the multitude of these scenarios. What's the image? Well, there are 20, roughly speaking, what I saw. And as you climb even higher, there are thousands of years. And even higher, you see through. Well, as you can see, you can perceive with all human bodies in one spiral. Yes, it's his mobility. It's his mobility and ability to move without getting caught up in forms.
Which everyone thinks, that is the soul.
No, no, no. Well, look, when you reach a level where there's no more of this smallness and these old spirals of time, you're still this organism, some kind of unclear one. But there is an even deeper level. I only shot there once. To shoot there, I practiced for 6 months.
Let's start with 20 bodies. Yeah. So you observe, 20 bodies, that works out. Projection. This robot walks, this robot walks. Where is the consciousness you're observing?
It's spread out all over this. Yes, spread out all over this. It fills everything with the ability to perceive. When you see these 20 bodies, you realize obviously that they act independently. But at the same time, you perceive through them the heart. Or rather, I move through the flow. This is the fourth space. The fourth gates were, when you enter the space of the fourth gates, you can move through the flow as if, here's the focus of your perception. You know, there's a microscope that, on the contrary, immerses you in detail. And there's also this other device, right? Exactly, it's like you're taking off, flying, 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 and at some point, here's mine, and mine, mine. Then you don't understand. What don't you understand? That all of humanity, all of reality, everything manifested was originally unmanifested. And so when you reach it, I reach this state, there besides yourself is the space, Kalium. Basically nothing grabs your attention anymore. And there's only one solution left. Or it becomes completely obvious to you that it's all such nonsense, such rubbish. That's it. It doesn't matter at all what happens in those scenarios. Just sit in this scenario. It may seem that here and everything is very important. Flying there with your perception, what happens doesn't matter. It's a static picture to explore. This is a static picture that you can move your attention through, but it may look strange. So when I got there, the first thing I realized right away was that there was no one else there. I was all alone. That there is no one else. I'm all alone. The second thing I realized is that the only place I can truly move towards is the space of Kali, Adi Kali. She watches you very closely. You can feel her gaze. You can feel her attraction deep inside. It's into the space of Kali, Adi Kali. She watches you very closely. So you feel her gaze, you feel her attraction deep inside you. I really want to dive back into her, dissolving into her, because I didn't see any possibility of preserving myself. The identity as something separate there. If I decide to return to the chaos from there, I immediately become that chaos. And because I immediately ask myself, so what else is there? So what else is there to do? So either I return to the unmanifested now, dissolving into Kali because she will immediately destroy all form, all manifestation, all possibility that can be perceived. Not because it's bad, but because that's just its nature. Like I don't know how a spaceship lands on the sun, it will just turn into a set of elements, not because the sun is bad, but actually there are more serious things. It's kind of like, I guess, stepping into a black hole. In the sun, it will simply turn into a set of elements, not because the sun is bad. Well, but those are actually more serious things. It's kind of like stepping into a black hole, right? That's probably how it is. Such a thing will appear. We dream about each other and what we don't dream about. Yes, especially when your legs are accelerating 1,000 times faster than your head. You notice that he knows. There is a possibility that at a certain distance from a black hole, time just stops. And you'll be there until the end of time, meaning you can try to reach it, but you just can't. Time is strange. But this is our style, our philosophy. In short, every black hole is a kind of practice. It has its own story of how it reached such a state. And you'll be there until the end of time, meaning you can try to reach it, but you just can't. Time is strange. But this is our style, our philosophy. In short, every black hole is a kind of practice. It has its own story of how it reached such a state. And some black holes are described in Vedic texts. He has a story about how he reached such a state, and some black holes are described in Vedic texts, but that's actually about someone else. Cool, interesting. If I were to remember this rush from the buttoned up, that's what it was called. Well, like when you read it, you understand that it's described in relation to modern world. You're understanding, yeah, that's it, in short. In the state of the original, you can remember, but first you're alone, there's no one else. Or you return to the essence, completely dissolving in it, giving up your state of wholeness as a person. Or do you dive back into those scenarios? I completely understand that there's absolutely no sense in this. It's just a way of postponing the inevitable for you. You're still going to return to Kali, and when I saw the opportunity to step into Kali, I was like, wait. Didn't plan to step into you like that. I had a different intention. I will return, but just the way I envisioned it, the way I want it, I'm talking about it now. I think, damn, this is just selfishness and pride, but allowed me shift your focus away from that unmanifested, very alluring, very desirable, and incredibly frightening, because you immediately understand what will happen next. You will disappear. You might disappear in an infinite orgasm, but you understand that you will disappear. I'm directing focus again, turning my attention back to these scenarios. And where was simples? Where am I already doing this? I have always been driven by a strong sense of purpose and determination, which is why I find myself in this position today, where I'm already realizing my intention. That's how it is. So, I came back here to implement this scenario. This place holds a special significance for me, and I am committed to seeing my plans through to fruition. So I came back here to implement this scenario. That's it. I need to make it happen. I need to make it happen. I need to make it happen. A couple of days go by and it all disappears like morning fog. And all my old habits, the old me is gaining potential. As soon as I realize that everything I can talk about today is just that, I've already twisted it 10 times because memory rewrites all these things. I make the decision that, wait, I want to go back there again, to fresh. I've experienced this state, but for now, that's where all the stories end, that I want to go back again to experience it. So what is the state of Tabardua? And in the state of Bordeaux, we find ourselves as a part of the original, but no one explains this to us. At this moment, our possibility is absolute, while the inertia that we've developed, it hides this fact. The subtitles were made by Dima Torzok. We are that particle of consciousness there, unburdened by anything else. That's what we must be. Yes, no one will tell you, not even you, what you should do, what will happen there. When we have a physical body, you get there, and even if you didn't generate any chop, it will still bring you back to the physical body one way or another. It's like an anchor. When you get there without anchors, just as a piece of consciousness, everyone gets there. You might as well practice. Everyone goes through this stage. This stage is when you are originally here. And this state is the first impulse that you generate. It gets realized right here. And if you're first, impulse is be horrified. It flattens you out, and boom, you're just like weight at the bottom. And you lie there in the space of the first gates, and you will lie there until the moment, Mahapralaya. When you initially say that you've played enough, he absorbs all of this back into himself, and it plunges into adequate. So basically, the question is just how you spend your time until the moment of the original return to the unmanifested. Here is the vision of a particle, a crystal of consciousness, a black crystal of consciousness. Lying around doesn't appeal to me at all. It will turn there, whether you like it or not, it will return there. Just wait, wait. If you are a little crystal in one, the king, a black dot one, then you can't do anything about it. It just pulls you into the original and it will go there. You won't have time to orient yourself. But if you are a great Mahavidya who has grasped all the laws of this universe and has gone beyond their limits, and it sucked you in, here's the moment of Mahapralaya, and you have exactly the same fate. It doesn't matter what you've achieved here. You're right, what you're saying makes sense, the logic works. But there is a phenomenon that is described in the texts as rishis. These are beings that greet the appearance of Shiva, well, or the Atman, doesn't matter how it should be. They greet his appearance, help him, teach him, show him all sorts of variations. And then he watches as he leaves. These rishi are described in the text. They are described sometimes as sages, sometimes as Brahmins, well, priests. There aren't just 4 of them. Some counts there are 18, and by others 36. But it doesn't really matter how you count. There will be that many. At least the rishi who passed on the knowledge of the Shliyantre, Agastya, has already counted 6 manifestations of Shiva, appearing and disappearing before his eyes, appearing and disappearing. Now that's more interesting. Yes, but you still float in the cologne inside it, right? You're not dissolving in it. Yes, you are no longer conditioned by endless games. So this Brahmin, Vishnu, there, what are you doing when you're floating around? Here they are. For example, teaching the articles of original consciousness practices. Practices that potentially allow you to achieve the same possibilities. But I become who? Become who? Independent from AI. So when I say I want to become independent from God, to break away from Him, I'm basically saying I want to detach from Him and watch how He will immerse Himself in space. Experience the wild state and see Shiva's journey. Yeah, damn. You know what I want to do next? I just want to become like a rishi. I want to experience this state. I want to watch how Shiva leaves this space, nothingness, and how he will grow back from there. Maybe, after observing this once, I'll say, I've experienced this rishi state. There's nothing special about it. And I'll dive in and dissolve in this Kali. I don't know, but I want to experience it. And this desire is to experience it. Not just read about it, not ask Hashem what it looks like, but to experience it. This is what motivates me to do what I do. So here I can't be satisfied in any way. It's not here.
It's just that you see it well as a result of all your practices. Certainly, yes. Well, let me explain this to you in more detail. For you specifically, what this means is that we are considering all the factors involved. We are looking at the situation from various angles to ensure that we provide the best possible outcome tailored to your needs. This involves a...
It is already obvious that everything that is here is meaningless. Well, meaningless. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about the nuance of that experienced state. I only had one. It wasn't that long ago, but it was a year ago. And I had to really put in the work, so I'm not in a hurry to repeat it now. I had one like that. You know, I was playing the fool there, that is, when you have already realized everything perfectly. When everything is obvious to you. But you want to say something, what if I'm wrong and I've misunderstood everything? And then I turn to Well, there's the original state, and then there's Shiva and the mind. And so I turn to myself in the state of the mind, at these absolutely transcendent levels of manifestation, with claims actually, but not out of claims like something is wrong. And so I turned to myself, a state of mind. At these absolutely extreme levels, there is a verse with a claim, in fact, but not from claims, that something is wrong. Maybe I misunderstood something. Maybe I made a mistake, but there's no meaning in anything. Everything already exists. Even my desire to become has already been realized before I even thought of it. I mean, on a global scale for the entire universe, it has already been realized. There's really no special meaning to it in terms of the mind. So, on a global scale for the entire universe, it has already been realized. There's really no special meaning to this in terms of the mind. And I immediately saw how it is structured in reality. And here too, with infinite fractalization, infinite self-similarity. To which she replied to me, "Well, I'm being very simple and primitive right now, but," she said, "then, do what has never been done before. Do it. I'm all yours. All the cards are in your hands. Just do it." To which I immediately replied, "You know what? I think I'll stick to my plan, and I still want to experience the state of a rishi. Yes, that state has already been experienced by other parts. Some kind of original state, but I want this for myself." So basically I said, since there's no meaning in anything, so coming up with something that has meaning, that's probably not me. It's not interesting. Because globally there's no meaning in anything. It doesn't matter what you come up with.
Do you want to unlock your inner strength and learn to manage energy? The course, Power of Consciousness 1. Practical energy will provide you with tools to improve health, develop intuition, and gain a deeper understanding of the world. Join and start changing your life right now. Link in the description.